An internal conflict reveals Jungkook's hidden role in BTS's success. When Taehyung's words break the harmony, who will restore the balance? You're just going with the flow, Jungkook. You're just going with the flow, aren't you? From the start, we've been carrying you. Taehyung's voice sliced through the heavy silence of the practice room, his words cutting deeper than any of the tired faces in the room were ready for. His gaze locked with Jungkook's, intense and accusing. His words reverberated off the cold mirrors, every syllable landing with the weight of something far more personal than a critique of a rehearsal. The members of BTS fell still. The usual hum of activity came to a sudden halt. Namjoon's jaw clenched. Jimin's eyes widened with a mix of surprise and disbelief. And Hoseok, usually the first to speak up, sat motionless. The air thickened, laden with tension. Yet, amid the stares and the silence, Jungkook said nothing. He simply lowered his head, his eyes studying the floor as if it held the answers to something he had yet to understand himself. Taehyung's words hung in the air, sharp and unforgiving. The others were waiting for Jungkook to react, to fight back, to show some sign of the passion that had always been so prominent in him. But there was only stillness, only silence. Jungkook didn't speak, didn't fight. His fists clenched, hidden in his lap, the tension in his body a silent scream. But his mouth stayed shut. A shift begins. The days that followed were a stark contrast to what had been. Jungkook, who had always been the first to arrive and the last to leave, began to fade into the background. The energy he once brought to rehearsals, effortlessly sharp, always pushing forward, was gone. His movements were still precise, but there was no spark, no fire. It was as though the soul had been drained from his every action. By the end of the week, his social media accounts had gone silent. All the posts, the updates, the glimpses into his life were erased, leaving nothing but an eerie void. Fans began to notice. They started asking questions, concerned, confused, unsure of what had happened. The hashtag where is Jungkook trended across Twitter for hours, fans speculating, hoping for answers that never came. And yet, the agency said nothing. Silence greeted the fans' inquiries, a quiet that spoke louder than any explanation ever could. An unexpected breakdown. It was supposed to be another ordinary rehearsal, a media preview to showcase their preparations for the comeback. The pressure was on, the expectations higher than ever before. But something went wrong, something big. The audio system, the backbone of every performance, suddenly malfunctioned. The vocal line couldn't keep up with the shifting tempo of the dance line, their harmonies falling out of sync. The dance moves felt disjointed, and the cameras, once so precise in their execution, missed every key transition. The usual choreography that had once been seamless felt like it was pieced together by people who had never worked as a unit before. The confusion spread like wildfire through the staff. The lighting technicians were confused by the missed cues. The stagehands scrambled to make adjustments. No one knew who had changed the formations or why they weren't working. The movements were sloppy. The transitions felt forced. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. It didn't take long for the truth to hit Taehyung. He remembered. Jungkook had always been the one to manage the unspoken connections. He had coordinated the subtle shifts in choreography and vocal arrangements. He had been the one to handle the technical details that no one saw until they were missing. Jungkook had been the invisible force binding everything together, making sure that every part of the performance fit perfectly, without anyone noticing. That a discovery in the dead of night later that night, as the others dispersed, exhausted and disheartened by the disaster they had just endured, Taehyung stayed behind. His mind was racing, his body heavy with the realization that something had been lost, something irreplaceable. He sat alone in the practice room, staring at the laptop open in front of him. It was a shared folder, usually filled with routine practice notes and feedback from staff. But this time, something caught his attention, a folder labeled JK Notes. Curious, he opened it. Page after page of detailed notes, each one carefully typed, as if written by someone who had been paying attention to every detail no one else had. There were notes on the timing of each vocal performance, ideas for improving the choreography, even suggestions for lighting transitions and camera angles to ensure the show flowed smoothly. The more he read, the more Taehyung's heart sank. Jungkook had been working tirelessly behind the scenes, making everything work without anyone even knowing that he had fixed the harmonies, adjusted the choreography, kept the whole group in sync, and all without a single word of recognition. He had been the one to make everything run smoothly, even when no one else was looking. The apology Taehyung sat there for hours, reading through the hundreds of notes Jungkook had written over the past few months. He felt a pang of guilt in his chest, a deep remorse that gnawed at him. How had he missed this? How had he been so blind? The anger and frustration he had felt toward Jungkook now seemed ridiculous, childish. His fingers moved slowly over the paper as he began to write. The words came with difficulty, each one an apology he felt he could never truly express. His handwriting was shaky, but he pushed forward, desperate to make things right. When he finished, he folded the letter carefully, his hands trembling slightly. With a sigh, he stood up and walked to Jungkook's room. He slid the letter under the door. Unsure of what would come next, in the quiet of the night, Taehyung whispered to himself, "I'm sorry. I never realized how much you've been holding us up from behind the scenes. If BTS is a home, you're the foundation." The knock on the door the next morning, as Taehyung was just about to leave for another long day of practice, there was a soft knock at his door. It was early, too early for anyone to be up, and as he opened it, he was met with the familiar face of Jungkook. His eyes were tired, his hoodie pulled up over his head, but there was a quiet strength in his gaze. Jungkook didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, his expression unreadable, before speaking softly. "Did you read everything?" The weight of those words hung in the air between them, and Taehyung felt the guilt and realization hit him once more. This wasn't just about a letter. This was about understanding everything he had missed. The tension hung thick in the air between Taehyung and Jungkook. For a moment, there was only silence, the weight of the previous days bearing down on both of them. Jungkook's eyes never left Taehyung, but he didn't ask again. His question, simple, quiet, but powerful, had already been asked. Taehyung felt his heart beat faster, the guilt growing heavier. "Did you read everything?" Jungkook's voice had been barely audible, but it reverberated in Taehyung's mind, louder than any scream. How could he have been so blind? All this time, Jungkook had quietly stood in the background, making sure things ran smoothly while the rest of them, Taehyung included, took the spotlight. And yet, Taehyung had been too quick to judge, too eager to lash out. He had expected Jungkook to be the youngest member, the one who was always following the lead of the others. What he hadn't seen was that Jungkook had long since outgrown that role. He was no longer just the magne, the baby of the group. He had become the silent backbone, the unseen thread connecting everything. Taehyung swallowed hard and stepped aside, gesturing for Jungkook to come in. The younger man hesitated for a moment before entering, his movements stiff, as if unsure of what would happen next. They stood facing each other in the small room, neither of them knowing how to break the silence. Jungkook finally spoke, his voice hoarse, as if he hadn't spoken in days. "I never wanted recognition. I wanted to help. I wanted to make sure everything worked, that no one else had to worry about the small details. That's my role. You guys always think I'm just the quiet one, but it's not that. I was just trying to make it easier for all of us." Taehyung's heart sank further as he listened to Jungkook's words. He had been so wrong about everything. He'd misunderstood Jungkook's silence for weakness, for a lack of initiative. What he hadn't understood was that Jungkook's silence was a form of strength. His quiet contributions were the glue that held them all together. Without those small but vital efforts, BTS wouldn't have survived. Taehyung could see that now. Jungkook continued, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I didn't want to burden you guys with what I was doing. I didn't want to make it seem like I was trying to control everything or take credit. But after you said that, I had to step back. I didn't want to cause more problems. Maybe it's better if I just stay out of the way." The words stung. Taehyung could hear the pain in Jungkook's voice, the hurt that his silence had caused. It was as if Jungkook had been quietly begging for understanding, and Taehyung had failed to see it. Jungkook, Taehyung started, his voice breaking slightly. He had never been good with words when it mattered most, but now he had to try. I'm sorry. I've been an idiot. I misjudged you. All this time, I've been looking at you as the magne, the kid who's always tagging along. But you're so much more than that. You've been carrying us all along, and I didn't even see it. I never realized how much you did, how much you held everything together. I've been so selfish. I thought it was all about the loudest voices, the strongest personalities, but it's you, Jungkook. You've been the quiet force keeping us grounded. Jungkook looked up at him, his eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and disbelief. For a moment, it felt like he didn't know how to process the apology. Maybe he had never expected it. I didn't want anyone to think I was trying to take over. Jungkook said softly, his voice shaky. I just wanted to help. I wanted us all to be better. Taehyung stepped closer, feeling the weight of everything that had been said. You are. There was a long pause. Taehyung could see that Jungkook's walls were slowly crumbling. They had always been teammates, always had each other's backs, but now it was different. Taehyung had seen something that he had never paid attention to before. It wasn't just about being the loudest or the most visible. It was about the quiet, unspoken contributions, the things that didn't get recognized until they were suddenly absent. For a long time, Jungkook had been the one who was always there, always steady, always dependable. It was easy to take him for granted, to forget how much he gave simply because he didn't ask for recognition. But that was the very reason he was irreplaceable. Taehyung felt the need to change things. He wanted to show Jungkook that his efforts didn't go unnoticed, that his presence was valuable, even if he never sought praise. He stepped forward and placed a hand on Jungkook's shoulder, an unspoken gesture of support and understanding. We need you, Jungkook, Taehyung said quietly. Not just as the magne, but as you. We need everything you do for us, even the things we never see. I'm sorry it took me so long to realize that. Jungkook didn't respond immediately. Instead, he closed his eyes for a moment, letting Taehyung's words sink in. There was a long silence before he finally spoke. Thank you, Hyung. The first step toward healing. The next few days were tense, but slowly, things began to change. The members of BTS, though still recovering from the rift, started to see the cracks in their foundation and how much they needed to rebuild. They began to lean on each other more, to open up about their thoughts and fears, to share their burdens more openly than they had before. For the first time, Taehyung began to truly understand the weight of what Jungkook had been carrying all this time. The younger member had always been the silent presence in the background, but now, Taehyung knew that Jungkook wasn't just a follower. He was the heart of their team, the one who made sure they never lost sight of what mattered. It wasn't just about their performances, their music, or their fame. It was about the bonds they had built over the years, silent, unspoken, and yet stronger than anything they had ever imagined. The email had arrived at 3:14 a.m., its subject line simple yet ominous. Urgent. Immediate attention required. Jungkook had been the first to check his phone, his eyes squinting in the dim light of his room. The message was brief, but the contents were enough to send a chill down his spine. We've just been notified of a potential breach in your contract. Media outlets are beginning to dig into personal and professional aspects of BTS, and an expose might be coming soon. We need a meeting tomorrow morning to discuss next steps. The email had been sent from the agency's head office, signed only with the initials AK. The message left far too many questions unanswered. Why was the agency suddenly scrambling? Were they covering up? Why now? Jungkook had tried to shake off the sense of unease gnawing at him, but there was no ignoring the weight of the situation. He had been through enough highs and lows to recognize when something wasn't right. And this felt wrong. The meeting by 10 a.m., all 7 members of BTS were seated in the conference room of their agency's headquarters. The mood was tense, with everyone quietly waiting for the other shoe to drop. Taehyung, who had tried to get a good night's sleep, was now running his hands nervously through his hair. Namjoon, ever the leader, sat at the head of the table, his brows furrowed in concentration. The staff trickled in, one by one, until the room was filled with faces that looked just as unsettled as the members. The agency's manager stepped forward, holding a thick folder in his hands. "We've received some disturbing news," he began, his voice unusually serious. "You might have seen the rumors swirling around online in the last 24 hours. What we didn't know, what we only found out this morning, is that some of those rumors are far from innocent. We believe someone within our circle might be leaking sensitive information." The room grew still as the implications of the words sank in. Leaks, betrayal. The idea that someone within their inner circle could be undermining them sent a shockwave through BTS. Namjoon, ever the composed one, was the first to speak. "Who's leaking this information? And what exactly are they trying to expose?" The manager hesitated. "We don't know for sure, but it's becoming clear that they are targeting the personal lives of the members. There are some private details that no one outside the group should know, that have somehow made their way to the media. If this continues, we risk losing our privacy and even our careers over lies and manipulations." Jimin's eyes narrowed. "Are you saying that someone from our own team might be behind this?" The manager didn't immediately answer. He simply gestured toward the folder, which was now being passed around the room. Inside were printed articles and screenshots of tweets, most of them exaggerated or outright fabricated. They spoke of secret conflicts within BTS, rumors of romantic entanglements, and even unsubstantiated claims about their personal finances. Taehyung took a deep breath, trying to process the overwhelming amount of information. His mind wandered back to the strange email he had read only hours ago, the one that had set off this chain of events. He couldn't help but feel that there was something larger at play, something they weren't being told. Jungkook sat quietly, his eyes darting between the others. He didn't speak, didn't need to, but there was something unsettling in his stillness. Taehyung noticed it, the way Jungkook had withdrawn again. It was as if the previous day's events had already begun to push him back into his shell. It made Taehyung's chest tighten, the realization dawning that their struggles hadn't just been external. They were fractured, too, internally. "Who were they targeting?" Taehyung finally asked, his voice low, a sense of dread creeping into his words. The manager looked at him gravely. "They're targeting all of you. But the most alarming thing? They seem to be focusing on Jungkook." Jungkook's head snapped up, his gaze locked on the manager's face, confusion written all over his features. "Me?" The manager nodded. "We have reason to believe that the information being leaked might be coming from someone close to you. Someone who's been in constant communication with you and has been privy to personal details about the group." The room fell silent. Jungkook's breath hitched. He knew there had been whispers, rumors here and there, but this was something else. Someone from the inside was using their private lives as ammunition, and somehow Jungkook was at the center of it. But why? He glanced at Taehyung, the person who had, until recently, been his harshest critic. There was a flicker of something in Taehyung's eyes, something like guilt, something like regret. Jungkook couldn't help but wonder if his absence had somehow led to this, if his silence had created a void for others to exploit. The unraveling begins as the meeting went on. The weight of the situation began to settle on Jungkook's shoulders. The idea that someone in their close-knit team was betraying them felt like a heavy blow. He had always believed that they were stronger than anything that could come from the outside. But now, faced with the possibility that the threat was from within, everything felt fragile. As soon as the meeting ended, Taehyung pulled Jungkook aside. The other members dispersed, their faces set in expressions of deep thought, but Taehyung couldn't let it go. Jungkook's unease had become his own. There was something about this situation that felt familiar, something about the way the pieces were falling into place that made him uneasy. "I don't want you to think," Taehyung started, his voice quieter now. "I didn't believe in you. I didn't mean what I said before, Jungkook. You know that, right?" Jungkook looked up at him, his expression unreadable. He wasn't sure how to respond. He had been waiting for Taehyung's apology, but it wasn't just the words that had to be mended. It was the trust. "I know," Jungkook said after a long pause, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know." There was a moment of shared understanding between them. The apology had been given, but the road ahead was going to be much harder. It wasn't just about repairing their relationship. It was about repairing the whole team. The rumors, the leaks, the betrayal from within. This was the real test. They had weathered storms before, but this was something they hadn't seen coming. And it threatened to break everything they had built. Jungkook couldn't shake the ominous message that had landed in his inbox. The words echoed in his mind as he sat alone in his room later that night, the silence around him pressing heavily. He had never felt more alone, even with all the other members in the same building. The idea that someone close to him, someone from within the group, might be behind the leaks filled him with an anxiety he couldn't quite control. The following day, Taehyung tried to approach him, but Jungkook kept his distance. There were too many unanswered questions. Why would anyone in their circle betray them? Was a member of the staff? Or one of the other members? Everyone had their own suspicions, but none of the possibilities seemed to add up that BTS continued their rehearsals, though the energy was tense and fractured. The group had always prided itself on its unity, but now, cracks were starting to show. The leaks were intensifying, with new rumors about BTS's personal lives circulating online. The members, once so confident, were now walking on eggshells. Namjoon tried to keep things together, but even his usual calm could not silence the rising doubts. Then, one afternoon, an unexpected breakthrough came. Jungkook found a pattern in the leaks. Every piece of personal information seemed to stem from private discussions during their meetings, rehearsals, or personal hangouts. There was one person who had access to these moments, someone who had been close enough to see everything, yet always stayed in the shadows. One of the staff members. Jungkook shared his findings with the group, and they set a plan into motion. They carefully observed their interactions with staff, scrutinizing their behavior for any signs of duplicity. The tension in the air was palpable as they pieced together the puzzle. Just as they were closing in on the suspect, another bombshell dropped. A video surfaced showing a conversation between one of their trusted staff members and a journalist, revealing that the staff member had been leaking information in exchange for money. The betrayal stung even more, knowing that someone who had been trusted, someone who was supposed to protect them, had instead been selling their secrets to the highest bidder. The group confronted the traitor. Emotions ran high. The staff member admitted to the leaks, but insisted it was because of financial struggles, rationalizing their actions as a desperate measure. The revelation hit hard. The person they had thought was one of their team had betrayed them for money, risking everything BTS had built for personal gain. Taehyung, standing at the forefront of the confrontation, looked at Jungkook, guilt heavy in his eyes. "I was wrong about you. You were right all along. You were always the one holding us together, even when we couldn't see it." Jungkook nodded, his gaze focused but calm. "It's not about being right, Hyung. It's about us. All of us. We can't let one person's greed tear us apart." With the culprit exposed and the trust between the members slowly rebuilding, BTS found themselves stronger than before. But the damage had been done, and the path ahead would require all their strength to walk. They had faced betrayal, but they had emerged united, ready to face whatever came next if BTS had exposed a traitor among their staff. But the relief was short-lived. As they tried to pick up the pieces, a new, more dangerous threat loomed over them. The anonymous message had promised something bigger, something that couldn't be ignored. Someone far more powerful, someone in the higher echelons of the industry, was behind everything, pulling the strings from the shadows. In episode 7, they began digging deeper, reaching out to trusted insiders, tracing every leak and connection. The more they uncovered, the more they realized that the sabotage was part of a larger conspiracy, one that was intended to destroy BTS from the inside. The mastermind, a powerful executive from their own label, had orchestrated the leaks and manipulation in order to weaken the group, causing internal strife and forcing them to break apart. The tension within the group grew as they uncovered just how deep the corruption ran. Taehyung, haunted by his past mistakes with Jungkook, took on a more prominent role in confronting the danger ahead. Meanwhile, Jungkook became the emotional backbone of the group, quietly pushing them forward, his determination now sharper than ever. In episode 8, BTS confronted the executive in a high-stakes meeting that almost shattered their unity. The executive was ruthless, dismissing their accusations and attempting to manipulate them further. But BTS refused to back down. They had weathered too many storms to be destroyed now. It was Jungkook who uncovered the final piece of the puzzle. While examining old contracts, he found a hidden clause that gave the executive control over their future activities, as well as a significant stake in their earnings. It was a clever trap designed to make BTS dependent on the very person who sought to destroy them. In Episode 9, the group devised a plan to expose the mastermind and reclaim control over their future. It was a risky move, involving leaked documents and a carefully orchestrated public revelation. With the support of their fans and a few key allies in the industry, they managed to turn the tables on the executive, stripping them of their power and forcing their resignation. The fight was long, and the scars would take time to heal, but BTS had triumphed. They stood united, not just as a group, but as a force too strong to be torn apart. The BTS thought they had triumphed over the corruption within their label, but the battle was far from over. In the aftermath of exposing the mastermind, they realized something even more unsettling. There was a larger, unseen enemy pulling the strings behind the scenes, one that had been working against them all along. It wasn't just about power or money. It was about control over the very heart of BTS. As the group dug deeper into their investigation, they uncovered a series of encrypted files that hinted at a shadow organization, one with ties to several powerful figures in the music industry. This group had been systematically working to weaken BTS, using everything from media manipulation to sabotaging their creative process. It was clear now that they had underestimated the forces at play. In the final confrontation, the group faced off against these hidden enemies. They were forced to make a choice: expose everything and risk losing everything, or keep fighting in the shadows to protect what they had built. The decision weighed heavily on them, but in the end, they realized that their strength lay not just in their music, but in their bond as a family. With the enemy finally exposed and their future secured, BTS emerged stronger than ever. The lessons they had learned about trust, betrayal, and resilience would stay with them forever, shaping not just their career, but their lives. They had fought for their survival, not just as a group, but as individuals who had found their true strength together.